Good evening, I'm Emma Jane Vea and this is Television Tonga News. In the headlines, 2 house fires reported this morning. Harvest of sea cucumber open for a 3-month period, and an international women's organisation provides development projects for Tonga. These and more stories, along with news from the Pacific, sports, world news and the weather forecast later on in this bulletin. Let's take a look at the news in detail. The Tonga Fire Services have recorded 2 house fires in the Nuku'alofa district this morning. The first house fire was Maglo Kindergarten in Golofo'o, and the second fire was a home in Popua. A total of 10 fires were recorded this week. Here's Linda Filiai with more on that story.
A house used many years as kindergarten in Golofo'o has been destroyed by fire. Maglo Kindergarten went up in flames this morning. Fortunately, no lives were lost, but none of the belongings from the kindergarten were able to saved. The estimated cost for the damages is more than 200,000 per anga. Another house fire was reported to a home in Papua this morning as well. The fire commander Sinamonika Waka says they received a call of the fire at Maglo Kindergarten at 20 minutes past 8 in the morning. We could see the smoke from the fire rising into the air from our office. When we arrived at the scene, the house was already engulfed by fire. The house was used as a kindergarten. The fire commander also says they are concerned over the number of fires reported. Since the beginning of this week up to now, we have recorded up to 10 different fires. 4 of these fires are house fires and the rest are bush fires. He wants the public to be careful to minimize the risk of fires at home. For Television Tonga News, I'm Linda Filiai.
A number of differences were expressed between Tongatapu's People Representative No. 3, Dr. Stephen Halapua, and his Fasmoeafi constituency over government's aid money in a parliamentary visit. Fatai Whainga'a sat in on the meeting and gives you this report.
Issues relating to government's aid money of more than 100,000 per anga to develop electoral constituencies each official year were in last night's meeting. Most of the members in the gathering said they have not witnessed any development or received information regarding to the aid money since 2011 when the aid was first implemented by the government. Although the MP and his constituency agreed the aid money should be used to meet their needs, they had different opinions on how it should be distributed. The residents called for the aid to go towards road maintenance, including the Tungi Road, where the Tonga Broadcasting Commission is located, among other development work. However, Dr. Halapua believes the money should first help those who are in dire need, rather than allocated among all villages in a constituency, as it won't be enough to fulfill each need. The meeting then agreed to select members to establish a committee which will manage the aid money. Other issues raised in last night's meeting includes concern over the increase in the number of crimes in the area, school dropouts, and a request to tighten the law on the purchase of alcohol. Fasimoeafi has 599 registered voters, with 20 participants attending last night's parliamentary visit. For Television Tonga News, I'm Fatai Whainga'a.
The legal counsel for the Tokai Golo Church sent a letter to the secretary of the church at the time to forbid the church from releasing any information to Radio and Television Tonga News for its news coverage. Anasiu Whanagaono has the details.
Reverend Sione Havili Maile told T News in Auckland that the letter was handed to him by a senior church minister of the Tokai Golo Church, Po'ulivaki. The letter stated a number of directions for him to follow, which he was not aware of. It also included a removal of a family from residing at Lavinga-Malie. The letter required his signature. I refused to sign, but Mr. Vaki told me this was a direction from the president of the church. Television Tonga News understand that the news story released about the church investment with David Hobbs caused unnecessary attention to be made on the church. There was no more information released by the Tokai Golo Church, but Television Tonga News understand that the President Reverend Dr. Liu Fau Vailia Saulala is not in the country. The split of the Tokai Golo Church, Reverend Maile says his platform will be known as Mo'ui Fo'o Iakalaisi and will be focused on listening to God. Our church will focus on listening to God's will and obedience. Anasio Falekano for Television Tonga News.
The Cabinet has approved to allow the harvest of sea cucumbers in Tongan waters for a 3-month period. The harvest of sea cucumber opened last Friday until October. The harvest season has been closed since March this year due to a diminishing supply. We'll join Sinilatu with more on that story.
The decision to allow the harvest of sea cucumber was based on a request from the Tonga National Fisheries Council. It's also believed that the supply of sea cucumber is stable state. One cabinet minister, who's also the Minister of Police, Fire Services, Prisons and Inland Revenue, Sosifa Tutafaiva, told Television Tonga News the request was given top priority. Priority was given to this request made by a lot of local fishermen as it serves as a main source of income for them. Furthermore, the supply of sea cucumber is stable, that's why a 3-month period is given. The president of the Tonga Sea Cucumber Association, Aleki Mataile, who's also a member of the Tonga National Fisheries, says the fisheries industry helps boost the country's economy.
On the 12th of July, the Cabinet, Prime Minister's Cabinet, also the Minister of Fisheries, Saulala, have worked together with the people of Tonga to help trying to build up the infrastructure of Tonga's economy. And so the Tongan people asked on the fisheries department side if the minister could help to ask the Prime Minister's Cabinet if they could be allowed to open up so that they may be able to provide a living for their families. And so which I'm grateful and I'm thankful for the Minister of Fisheries and Agriculture, Singsta Saulala, and also the Prime Minister and his Cabinet for allowing this to come true.
Mr. Matale also confirmed that the supply of sea cucumber is in a stable condition. To date, the Tonga National Fisheries and the Fisheries Ministry will review license applications to harvest sea cucumber. For Television Tonga News, I'm Sinlatu.
A tripartite project with Australian and New Zealand Federal Police will help with construction for police stations in the rural areas. Whanonga Veikoso tells you more.
Construction work has begun for the Mua Police Station thanks to a donation from the Australian and the New Zealand Federal Police. According to the Honourable Minister of Police, Fire Services, Prisons and Inland Revenue, Sosifa Tutafaiva, the funding is under a tripartite program with the two countries. There is a multi-million aid money donated from Australia and New Zealand to the Ministry of Police. These include new vehicles and the construction of Vaini, Ewa and Hapai Police Station, which has been completed. The construction of Mua and Mavao Police Station is underway, and later on maintenance work will be carried out to the main police station in Nuku'alofa. The aid money is not given directly, but through these resources. Meanwhile, the staff of Mua Police Station have relocated to the Vaini Station, while construction work continues. This development work is to be completed later this year or early next year before similar work is carried out to the Nukunuku Police Station. Whanonga Veikoso for Television Tonga News.
In a parliamentary visit last night to constituency number 9, residents at the meeting raised concerns over sand mining to their people's representative, Falis Dubo. Anati Falekaona was there and filed this report.
In the parliamentary visit, some villagers said many people are deserting the land allotments in Lavenga Tonga and moving to urban areas in Nuku'alofa for school and work. This abandoned land issue was also raised as many families in Lavenga Tonga are in need of land allotments for themselves. It is really sad to see how we live. The town officer is the only one that has his own land. We want to be proper residents of this village and own a piece of land of our own. In addition, the meeting also raised disappointment over the funds initially delegated from a national budget passed in Parliament for students' transportation. The funds were diverted instead to help with the salary of teachers in various church schools. We have a private bus that is used to transport our students to school. The maintenance of this vehicle is taken from the village's own pockets. I heard on the radio about the assistance for students, and I was hoping they could help us with the transport costs for our students. Mr. Dubois said the decision was made to divert the funds initially for transport of students elsewhere was because not all villages have their own transport, therefore all will benefit from the assistance. The idea was raised in Parliament, but because of the delegation of the funds was not determined, it was not approved. In a previous interview with Television Tonga News, the Honourable Minister of Finance, Lisiate Akolo, said the fund targeted the area of transportation, which includes students from the rural areas and the outer islands. The Finance Minister said it also aimed at helping parents and guardians who cannot cover transport costs for their children to school. Other areas raised in the meeting include the need for street lights, road maintenance to the bush allotments, reduce the age limit for elderly benefits scheme from 75 to 70 years old, and a community patrol officers. The street light will light the way for pedestrians at night and also help with the work of the community officers. And this is Mr. Dubois' response. The street lights for the main roads is an aid, and at the moment they are still working on replacing the poles and the wires, which will take quite a while. Currently they're doing their phase 1, but they're doing a phase 5 altogether, which is going to take for 5 years. Currently they're doing phase 1, but they are 5 phases altogether, which is going to take 5 years. 6 people sat in on last night's meeting out of 187 registered voters in Lavenga-Tonga. There are 12 villages under Tongatapu constituency number 9. They are Tatakamotonga, Alakifonua, Holonga, Pelehake, Toloa, Fo'amotu, Nakolo, Ha'asini, Hamula, Lavenga-Tonga, Fatumu, and Haveluliku.
The Associated Country Women of the World, in collaboration with local women's organizations, are implementing successful development projects in the kingdom. The president of the organizations for the South Pacific, Ruth Shanks, was in Nuku'alofa to inspect the progress of the various development projects, and was able to visit the homes which were recipients of this assistance. Kalaine Tongilava tells you more.
Under this development project, it included providing landfills for homes that are located in low-lying areas, including Sopotaufa Ahau, Tufuenga, Tongataiapa, and other villages. Mrs. Ruth Shanks told Radio and Television Tonga News they are encouraging local families to have homegrown vegetables and local meat farm in order to ensure a sustainable food supply.
Well, I think it will benefit the women and the families that live in the homes, that they're not flooded all of the time, and that they don't lose their belongings every time it rains, and then they're able to grow some vegetables as well to supplement their food, as well as maybe to supplement their income.
The ACWW donated more than 30,000 pa'anga to fund this project. The funds were released from the organisation after a proposal from the local Aloha Ma'atonga Women's Group. During Mrs. Shanks' visit to Nuku'alofa, she visited Her Majesty Queen Anasba'u yesterday at the Royal Palace.
Really excited to have an audience with the Queen, and I had some money to bring over from one of the organisations in Australia to give to the King's Charity Trust, and so that was the occasion for meeting with the Queen. So.
The ACWW has provided funds for previous development projects for Tonga, including the refurbishment of the kitchen for the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries and Foods Women's Department in Valamotua. Reporting for Television Tonga News, I'm Kalolaine Tonglava.
That's the local news. Pacific is next. From the Pacific, in Australia, authorities have rescued 120 people from an asylum seeker boat about 175 kilometres east of Christmas Island. The Australian Maritime Safety Authority says the people have been transferred onto 2 Australian customs ships. The boat sent out a distress call earlier. Kevin Rudd, meanwhile, is preparing to announce an overhaul of asylum seeker policy. ABC's political correspondent Latika Burge reports.
Of course, Labor has a very long and tortured history on this policy area, and it's now an area where the Prime Minister Kevin Rudd concedes he and the Labor government made mistakes in not adjusting to the change dynamic and the people smugglers business model or quick enough or rapidly enough. Now, the Cabinet Minister Anthony Albanese was on Lateline last night. He didn't give too much detail about what we might expect, and obviously following on from the Prime Minister's comments yesterday that he's looking at or perhaps wanting a conversation about redefining the Refugee Convention and how that sits with modern asylum seeker movements and, of course, sits within the framework of people smuggling networks.
As the people smugglers model changes, so must policy change. So there's no point in time in which you can say that all the work is done, and what you need to do is constantly modify your policy to meet the changed response.
The former Foreign Minister Gareth Evans says he doesn't think Australia would ever walk away from the core intent of the UN Refugee Convention.
I think we have to recognise that for decades, actually, there have been concerns about the applicability of the Convention to the circumstances of the 21st century.
There's obviously some actions that, or policy decisions, the government would want to take that it would see a more immediate response, and particularly the one about looking at redefining or even renegotiating the Refugee Convention. You'd presume that would be a long-term project because it would have to be done within the framework of the international community.
Education has been a massive service export for Australia, but is now facing greater challenge for one of its most important markets, China. Universities in Hong Kong are now competing for the students who would traditionally be heading for Australian institutions.
Here in Hong Kong, graduating high school students have received their final results this week. Results which determine whether or not they can go to university, and if so, which course they could enrol in. Now, another big decision that these students have to make is whether or not they might like to go overseas to study, places like Australia. Now, in recent years, there's been a big drop-off in students from Hong Kong travelling to our shores. You know, there are lots of reasons for that. But now this looks like it might be turning around. Now, a key reason for this, of course, is the Australian dollar coming down. If you're a Hong Kong student, Australian dollar coming down, well, it makes it much more affordable to travel to Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide to study. And another thing which has changed are the visa regulations, which mean that if you're a Hong Kong student or a Chinese mainland student and you go to Australia to study, well, now with the visas that they can get, they can work for a few years afterwards. Now, we're told this is especially crucial for people working in the health industry, like, you know, nurses and doctors, because it means you can do your studies and then stay on in Australia and keep working afterwards. The crucial thing for Australia is that Britain has stopped giving out these visas. So Britain's loss has been our gain. But this is a competitive industry, and there's still the United States and other countries that people are weighing up when they're deciding whether or not to study or not. So, while it does look like it's turning around for Australian universities in terms of attracting students from Hong Kong, the Australian education sector is going to have to be really on edge and out there competing for these students if it wants to keep them coming in greater numbers.
Thailand's railway authorities says Australian tourists were among 23 people injured in a train derailment.
Overnight sleeper train was carrying almost 300 passengers when 7 carriages came off the tracks in the country's north early yesterday. 18 foreign tourists suffered minor injuries as the carriages toppled onto their sides.
That's Pacific News. Sports is up next with Pierre Ollier.
In sport, New Zealand Ocean 11 team defeated Tonga's national cricket team yesterday in a friendly test in the Whalaoheleni ground. A former member of the national team, Bayan Noah, says despite they've defeated the home team, but there has been many developments witnessed in the games. He says he's happy with the improvements and is looking forward for more talented cricketer in the future. In addition, he says this test aimed at identifying Tonga's weaknesses in his sports and are looking forward to aid Tonga's national team in any way they can. Mr. North says it pleases that Tonga still strive to revive the game in Tonga and can prepare some well-talented cricketer to compete in international clubs. Amongst the Tongans in the visiting team were Iveni Takimoyaka, Ofa Malele, and Ma'onoa, also Semi Haranuka. Valerie Adams won her 37th straight shotput competition when she stopped the field in Swiss City this morning. With just over 3 weeks to the start of 2013 Moscow World Championships, the double Olympian propelled the 4-kilogram shot out of the 20.76 meters and was in trouble in beating the world number 3 for 2013, Christina Swins, who could only manage 19.65 meters. In Moscow, Adams will attempt to win her 4th consecutive world title, having already won at Osaka in 2007, Berlin at 2009, and Taegu in 2011. The Swiss-based Aucklander also won the bronze medal in Helsinki in 2005 and was promoted as second after a historic positive track test by Persurian Nadsegya Ostapchuk. Adam has one more competition scheduled before Moscow, a Diamond League meeting in London on 27th of this month. Richie McGaw makes his top flight return to Super Rugby on the Crusaders bench for Saturday's playoff against the Reds in Christchurch. Coach Todd Plagada has made one change to his starting 15, with lock Luke Romano cleared to return in place of Tom Donnelly, who drops out of the squad. Luke Whitelock will cover lock from the bench. McGaw returns after 80 minutes of club rugby under his belt since his 6-month sabbatical. And that's sports news.
From World News, in India, angry protests have erupted in India's north after more than 20 children died after eating meals that were provided by their government-run school. As the ABC's India correspondent Stephanie March reports, it's suspected insecticide may have contaminated the food.
Devastation at the loss of so many little lives turns quickly to anger. Relatives of the dead children went on a rampage, attacking police and calling for swift justice.
We demand that the supplier who provided the poisonous food should be immediately arrested. The families of the affected children should be given immediate compensation.
The children fell ill only hours after eating. Many were rushed to hospital. Some were already dead by the time they arrived. The medical team treating the children believe that insecticide may have been accidentally or intentionally added to the food.
It's very dangerous. Even a small quantity of it would prove fatal for small children. Looking at the critical condition in which they were brought to the hospital, it seems like there were large quantities of poison in the food that they consumed.
India's midday meal initiative is the biggest feeding program in the world, providing lunches for 120 million students. However, food preparation in many school kitchens across the country remains a problem, and relatives of the dead children were quick to blame the government for not monitoring the free meal scheme properly.
The matter will be investigated and we will take strong action. The culprits behind this will not be spared. This isn't a systemic thing. It appears to be a local incident where this poisoning has happened.
As well as helping tackle malnutrition, the free meal program also boosts enrolment numbers. And in a country with an entrenched class system, it promotes inclusion, bringing children from different backgrounds together to share a meal. A well-meaning initiative ending in tragedy. Stephanie March, ABC News.
In Asia, Southeast Asian leaders are holding urgent talks in Kuala Lumpur this week to tackle the latest haze problem in Indonesia. Last month, forest fires on the island of Sumatra choked Malaysia and Singapore, causing the worst pollution levels in 16 years.
Smoke haze is an almost annual problem for people in Singapore and Malaysia. It often begins mid-year, when farmers in Indonesia clear land the cheap way.
The heart of this matter is a commercial problem. It is much cheaper to burn the forest than to cut the trees, use a tractor, use a bulldozer to prepare the land.
The situation reached a crisis point last month when air pollution levels soared in Indonesia and also in neighbouring Malaysia and Singapore. Working out who's responsible is proving difficult. Malaysia and Singapore say Indonesia has to fix the problem, but Jakarta says some fires have been from plantations linked to Singapore and Malaysia.
Yeah, right now we seriously taken on the ground, and as soon as possible we can announce who engaged this.
Environmentalists say the blame game must stop.
The point is for Indonesia is more investing in forest protections in terms of human resources, equipment, investigators and stronger law enforcement.
The companies accused of starting the fires deny any wrongdoing. They say there are maps which prove their plantations aren't the source. The only problem is Indonesia isn't sharing them.
The hotspot data, the satellite maps are already available. The key missing ingredient are the concession maps. Speaking purely from a Singapore perspective, in fact, we would prefer that all this data is available in the public domain.
The haze is expected to stick around for another 3 months, but there's been no forecast on how long it'll take for governments to find a lasting solution to the problem. Sam Blytho, ABC News.
In Africa, as Nelson Mandela remains critically ill in hospital, global celebrations are being held to mark his 95th birthday. Behind the scenes, family infighting and ugly allegations around Mr. Mandela's legacy are rife. Africa correspondent reports on the struggle over South Africa's history and its most famous citizen.
For almost 3 decades, Nelson Mandela's struggle to overthrow apartheid took place behind bars. Now the nation's divisive history is a tourist drawcard.
It's not the Cinderella story. It tells of the horrors that took place. They are shown quite openly in this museum.
The Apartheid Museum, with its separate entrances, lays bare the country's racist past. The policy of apartheid, or separate lives, clung to life in South Africa until 1991. 3 years later, Nelson Mandela was elected president, marking the country's transition from minority to majority rule. For many South Africans born after white minority rule was brought to an end, apartheid has already been consigned to history.
I think people will tell their children about it and their grandchildren about it, but after a while it will probably disappear.
There's still racial issues to look at within the country here and there, but overall the people are really getting with how things are now.
But now a new battle about the past is emerging. Managing the memory of Mr. Mandela and his legacy has not only divided the Mandela family, but has moved into the political sphere. The ruling ANC has been accused of promoting its own version of history while riding on Mr. Mandela's legacy, a charge it denies.
I think the issue about educating all the young people in the country about where we come from is important, is essential, and that's what the Youth League should be playing and other youth organisations who are part of the ANC.
The ANC's view of its place in history is being challenged as its own political stranglehold over the nation is slipping.
We've had a lot of stories from the ANC about their founding leaders and about the presidents of the ANC past. But it's that old adage that the victors write history. So people are starting to question how accurate is their portrayal of what their role in the apartheid struggle was all about.
At 95 years of age, Mr. Mandela's place in history is assured, but for those left behind, it's yet to be written. Ginny Stein, ABC News, Johannesburg.
That's World News. We'll now take a look at today's weather bulletin. A trough lies slow moving over the north of the New West, Meanwhile, a ridge of high pressure extends onto Tonga from the southwest and directs a moderate to fresh southeast wind flow over the group. Forecast at midnight tomorrow for Tonga, moderate to fresh southeast winds, gusty at times. Cloudy with some showers over the Niuas. Elsewhere, mostly cloudy with brief light showers. For Saturday, moderate to fresh southeast winds, gusty at times. Cloudy with some showers. The temperature forecast for Nuku'alofa will reach a minimum of 19 degrees Celsius tonight. For the Marine Weather Bulletin, a strong wind warning remains in force for all Tonga coastal waters. Forecast at midnight tomorrow for all Tonga coastal waters, southeast winds 15 to 25 knots, rising up to 30 knots at times, moderate to rough seas, and a moderate to heavy southeast swell. That's the weather, but before I go, let's take a final look at our top stories. 2 house fires reported this morning. Harvest of sea cucumber open for a 3-month period, and an international women's organisation provides development projects for the kingdom. That ends our news for tonight. For more on these stories, you can call us on 23556 or 23555, or you can check out our website on www.tonga-broadcasting.net. I'm Emma Jane Vea. Thanks for watching. Good evening.